Which Side Podcast is a proud member of the Which Side Media Collective.
This week's episode is brought to us by Jelly Bean Toes. Recently, news broke of a Spanish woman who was fined €100 for carrying a handbag saying "all cats are beautiful" because police thought the initials ACAB meant "all cops are bastards." So to help remind police that it's okay to love cats, we're offering 50% off all our ACAB shirts, patches, and bandanas in the Which Side Media Collective store. Just use promo code ACAB at checkout. That's whichsidecollective.org.
Promo code ACAB. This is episode 189.
Yeah, we talked with Sasha Ali from Nusantara Indonesian Tea Cafe.
We recorded right before the tragedy in Orlando, and she wanted us to read this statement afterwards. I stand with Orlando to the families and communities affected by the tragedy in Orlando and extend my empathies also with the LGBTQI Muslim communities who are caught in the political hodgepodge of Islamophobia and queerphobia in the U.S. So, stick around for the interview. Hey Jordan, what news and events do we have going on?
If you're going to be in Salt Lake City on June 25th, you should swing by Zest Cafe for 80s Night with Teenage Fanny Club. It's a fundraiser for Utah Animal Rights Coalition as well as the Salt Lake City Veg Fest. So, head on over to that. As far as news goes, in Ukraine, on June 16th, 12 hunting towers were destroyed.
Way to go, Ukraine.
Yeah.
The pictures were pretty fucking cool, by the way.
I really loved that card.
I love the axe, though, for some reason.
Yeah.
Just like in the they're fucking cool. Go look them up.
Yeah. There's a card with a
beautiful
rainbow.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love it.
Brilliant.
Just made my heart swell. Loved it. But for the slingshot this week, June 22nd, 1633, the Vatican forces Galileo to recant the view that the Earth is not the center of the universe. We all know it's Jordan.
Absolutely.
If you like these little tidbits of history, go pick one up. Go support go support their awesome collective. You can get one at a local info shop. I've never heard of a local info shop not having one.
No.
They're pretty common.
That's where I got mine.
Yeah. Or you can get one on an online info shop like AK Press. You know, if you're a friend of AK Press, you actually get a discount on it too. Just saying.
Everyone should really be a friend of AK Press.
Dude,
it's such a good
it.
deal.
Yeah.
They're not sponsoring us. We just
no. I honestly, seriously, just love it. I love every book. They have 5 coming out in the next 2 months. So if you're not a friend of AK Press, go sign up. You'll get 5 free. Well, you'll get 5 books in the next 2 months.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's fucking awesome.
I just need to find the time to read.
that's half the battle, right? That's why I get the digital,
and the book. Yeah.
So I kind of switch back and forth what I'm doing. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. Anyways, I sincerely hope you enjoy this episode. And I'm Jeremy. I'm here as Lil.
Hi, Jeremy.
I am always amazed at how clear we can get the connection, and we're so fucking far apart from each other.
I know, right? Like, I live by the native bushes. Like, my house is kind of by this creek, and normally it's really hard to get good reception on the phone, but somehow on the internet it's sweet.
Well, when you say native bushes, what does that mean?
Oh, like, it's basically like a suburbia space out in Waitakere Ranges, which is the west of Auckland.
Oh,
and,
okay.
Yeah, it's known to, be full of swamps and that sort of thing. But part of where the suburb is kind of connected to a creek. So I get to live on that side of the world out west. So yeah. It's really hard to talk to people on the phone locally, but internet-wise, it's all good. Crazy, huh?
So what does the suburbs out there look like? I imagine it just being amazingly beautiful.
Yeah, with lots of sheep running around. No, it's different everywhere in Aotearoa, New Zealand, right? So in Auckland, it's obviously more urbanized. There's the metropolitan center, which is pretty. It's not too busy. It's quite laid back in some spaces, but the rest of Auckland, typically like the South Auckland region is kind of stereotyped as the ghetto side of Auckland. So you would see more people of color from Pacific Island communities, indigenous Maori communities, and heaps of low-income Asians living out south. And then on the west side of Auckland, we're known to be the wettest part of Auckland. Like, for whatever reason, the rain likes to visit us. And so we've got a huge amount of lush green native forests and parks and amazing beaches for surfing and things like that. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But like communities wise, we also have like that sort of partly ghetto, partly, and then some parts are really affluent. Like, I think I'm kind of living in the middle part of it because I'm closer towards the north side, which is where all the white people live, really. When I say white people, I mean obviously people of higher income, typically white, and or communities, migrant communities that are higher income. So that's pretty much Auckland in a nutshell when I perceive it.
That's crazy to me because I've never been, but I've never, for some reason in my mind, I never viewed it as a place that would be described so separate by race like that. I mean, I know most places in the U.S. are, right? Like most metropolitan places are, because people are assholes. I don't get it, right?
Yeah.
But for some reason, I never pictured that there. I always just pictured it like just this perfect little picturesque, idea of almost utopia, right?
I think that's what people like to think. I think whether people who have traveled or lived in New Zealand from overseas, I mean, so my background, I immigrated from Singapore, and I say Singapore instead of Singapore, which is what I think most people know that country by, because that's the indigenous name of that country, and I am an indigenous Malay person from that country. So I immigrated from Singapore, like post 9/11, and so immediately, even without me wanting to, be politically or be politicized as a brown person coming to a country like this beautiful country called New Zealand, I think my subconscious with the media and the way, the surroundings of being a part of a white dominated society, basically it just without me realizing it, I was consciously aware of the race dynamics already, I think it's probably, something that if you are a person of color or an indigenous person from a native land or a land elsewhere, you probably might be able to see it that way. It's pretty much naturalized in your being because of, the different dynamics you might have grown up in society based on class or gender or race. But I guess for me, like, when I came to New Zealand, I thought, yeah, it's a really cool country. It's lots of farm animals, I guess. And back then I wasn't even vegan. So I took it like, oh, it's like a little spot for retirement or something because it's so quiet and slow. And, you wait for buses for hours. And it was just kind of like a huge shift from what I knew from Singapore, which, if you may or may not know, is this hyper, what do you call it? Consumerist, hyper, like just really hyper modern technologized society per se, Mm-hmm. It was like I was a robot and then suddenly I became human. It was weird.
So what was that like your was going to New Zealand? Was that what kind of made you look at the ideas of like colonization and white dominated society and starting to question those things?
Yeah, I guess I have to start from the point that even prior to coming to New Zealand, I had like a, what do you call it, like an awareness, of various injustices that happen already socially. I came to Aotearoa, New Zealand with my family when I was 18, and prior to that, in my teens, I was involved in the punk community and the zines, the independent zines and independent publishing subculture in Singapore, music and art-wise. And so, I guess I had some sort of exposure to, how fucked up the world is. But also, even in Singapore, there were dynamics of racism and, poverty and hidden poverty, at least, that the rest of the world weren't aware of. And so coming from that positioning, when I got to Aotearoa, New Zealand, I had very little knowledge of the colonial history of Aotearoa, New Zealand when I first got here. I just imagined it to be like anyone does, a really pretty country, and I knew that the tangata whenua, the native people, were Maori people, and they seemed to have a cool look about them. They had tattoos, all right, sweet, I was that kind of naive young person. And then I got thrown into a suburb in Christchurch, which is in the South Island of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and it's known for, being quite a like a part of racist conflict. It's mostly white dominated. It was not very multicultural in its setting as well. And I got thrown into a suburb called Aranui, which was low income. I was probably one of the very few Asian families and the only Muslim family in that suburb. And there were lots of skinheads. Like when I say skinheads, I mean like, the actual racist ones. And there were a lot of gangs as well. So I don't know, maybe it was just my luck. Maybe it was just fated. I don't know. I believe in that sometimes, like that I had to go through that journey of seeing the worst part of Aotearoa, New Zealand in terms of race dynamics. And then kind of like through that, I found a voice to articulate my perspective as as an immigrant young person back then. And I guess through that, I managed to connect to the, when I was in varsity here, like I managed to connect to the anarchist community in Christchurch, which was, again, very white, male-dominated. But I was at a point in 2003 and 2004 where there was a lot of but there was a trend towards dialoguing about Indigenous rights sovereignty in the anarchist movement. So I think I was just at the right place at the right time when my sense of experience of Aotearoa, New Zealand's race politics and gender politics just connected to what was going on in that day and time, Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and I think from there I learned about how lack of awareness, even Pākehā, or the Pākehā is what they call the people who are white or people other than Maori in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I realized that there was already a lack of awareness about how Indigenous race politics work. Like they was just beginning to have that conversation, it seemed. I'm sure there were a lot of people who were part of various movements that tried to have the conversation about recognizing Native and Indigenous rights issues. But when I was there, from what I was observing, it was like, it just dawned on them that, oh yeah, the anarchist movement, we're not very culturally sensitive, huh? It was just kind of like, what? You guys didn't know this? Like, yeah, and it was a very strange space to be in, and I was pretty sure I was the one out of 3 people of color in a group of, I don't know, like 60 people back then in a conference. And I spoke up about, if we're going to talk about race politics, we might as well add on the fact that there's a growing immigrant population across Aotearoa, New Zealand, and where is our voice and what is our space in connection to, recognizing Native Maori land sovereignty and their self-determination issues. that was not well received. I think I was kind of told to park that question.
Really? Yeah. Why
that's
did they
interesting.
not want to address that?
They could be logistical, probably because I asked the question towards the end of a forum, and I probably felt confident to only ask the question towards the end, being a minority in an audience, you know, and also because the space felt like it wasn't welcoming or inclusive enough of my question. So, and so the logistical response was that because based on the fact there was a lack of time. But I think what happened after that was I managed to meet a few people who actually approached me later on and say that was an important question, or we haven't really considered it. We haven't had anyone really ask or talk about it. And I was like, well, duh, because the anarchist movement is so white dominated, and there's no opportunity for people of color who are, you know, whether they're of immigrant background or whatever, to really engage. So I was in that space where, you know, there was an opportunity to engage if people, you know, gave resources and support to people like me to ask those questions, but it was parked because of the lack of time. Of course, that didn't stop me from continuing having that conversation, right? So I think my reflection of that moment made me want to get more involved in the anarchist movement and seek more avenues to puncture the space, so to speak, to ask these questions annoyingly wherever it has to be. And the zine movement and the blogging movement back then in the early 2000s, if you guys remember, was pretty huge. So huge in terms of it was emerging, and, you know, people did look out for things online to read about stuff. So it was a good space to have political opinions and puncture as many spaces as you want. So yeah, that's basically how it happened, I think. Yeah.
So was your general consensus of like the anarchists, like that they just weren't willing to work within, like, to answer your question, or
Just like didn't know how, maybe.
I think it was a bit of both. I think it was like that moment in time. This is the early 2000s, right? So things have changed, and I'd really like to talk about that a bit more. Early 2000s, you know, generally society in Aotearoa, New Zealand, specifically back then in Christchurch in South Island, was very, you know, kind of isolated and small, the anarchist community. It was quite small. And the way I understood it, based on an observer's perspective, was there was more connection to the rest of New Zealand through white-dominated networks as well. You know, it was very, you know, internet-based. It was very connected to music and writing spaces, you know. And the organizing activist stuff, I didn't see much of that really going on. And so I think when you've got a lot of that theoretical thinking stuff, and when I say that, I meant like, you know, the writing stuff, the talking stuff, and then you don't see a lot of the action stuff where there's organizers who, you know, coordinate people to go to protest initiatives, or organize people to, you know, fundraise or develop like tools or models or improvement for the communities at large. You kind of feel a bit jaded that they don't seem to have the ability or capacity to actually, you know, sort of respond to questions that I kind of come up with. Do you know what I mean? It's like if you're in a situation where you realize that they're not ready for this question because, you know, you can see kind of like their faces. Like I read people's faces. Like it looks like oh fuck, where did this question come from? You know? So it's like when people aren't ready for your questions, you can get frustrated about it, or you can find a way to develop spaces where those questions can be explored. So I was lucky to know a few people, even the anarchist movement, who you know, realized that there was a lack of space for people of color or people of immigrant backgrounds to be part of that space. There were very few, and they weren't in Christchurch. They were actually in Auckland. So when I moved to Auckland with my family, my parents got a job there, you know, that sort of thing. And I finished my degree in women's studies and sociology in Auckland. I managed to meet like-minded folks who, some were specifically, describing themselves as anarchists. And then some was just, like feminist, and they just had this radical view on society at large, and they don't really want to align with any political, concept or theory because it's stigmatizing or whatever. So, yeah, I think I felt more comfortable to explore these questions in spaces which was self-determined by ethnic minority groups or, gender minority groups. And that's where I found the networks to develop capacity to invite that dialogue to begin again. Mm-hmm. So I think when you're part of a minority culture, like any minority culture, even if it's in a hegemonic white society, we've got punk subculture, whatever, you have to come from a space of resistance. So if you realize the dominant group is not going to open the space, you got to make a space for yourself and then push for that space to be included in the dominant space. So I think now we're in what are we now? 2016, right? Mm-hmm. 2016. It's been 10, 11 years maybe since I had those conversations in the beginning. I feel like we've kind of come a long way in a way. I won't say that I or the groups that I've been involved in, the Asian Feminist Sisterhood group or the people of color solidarity networks here. Like, I wouldn't think that it was because of, what we did in the 2000s that kind of created this growth. I'm sure there were people before us that seeded that space to begin with by, being part of the movement in the 70s and being just visible in activist spaces in general. But that act of organizing the development to build solidarities, I think that was kind of emerging more in the mid 2000s till now. So I think we've come a long way, but it's good. It's good. It's not so tense.
When was the moment that you sat back and realized, like, oh, I'm an anarchist? Or do you know what I mean? Like, because like with me, I was calling myself an anarchist way before I had that moment. Like, oh, I'm actually an anarchist.
I thought it was the cool thing to do.
Yeah. Like I said, I started, reading a lot, right? Like zines, writing, shit like that. So, the word anarchism, when I was in my teens in Singapore, was obviously very different. We were part of a police surveillance society. Like, that country is all quite fucked up. We don't have freedom of speech. We don't really have freedom of expression. We don't have legitimate indigenous rights as well, So, anarchism was this like romantic idea, like, it would be great if everybody was free to do whatever they want, and then like we help each other, and then we have this little commune-like society, and then we play and make music and bake whenever we want, But life doesn't turn out that way in a capitalistic society. So when I came to Aotearoa, New Zealand, I was really shy about even describing myself as an anarchist, and I still feel like I'm not quite, because there's always going to be people who tell me that I'm not one. It's like, and then one time, and I was like, because I'm Muslim, right? So, when you're a Muslim and then you're in a situation, like you're in a post 9/11 global society situation, and then you've got the ISIS situation right now. And then, you've got all this like phenomenal killings happening everywhere. And so when you're a Muslim and and you describe yourself an anarchist, you're either a contradiction to the Western society, because it's like, how can you be that? Or you are at risk of being almost a jihadist, right? Because it's like, if people don't understand, if people don't understand what anarchism is, and they associate it with those elements that aren't accurate. You know what I mean? Like the, just the Circle A logo vandalized everywhere, and just kind of and then the narrative of riots when you have the word anarchism. Mm-hmm. Then you would, and then if you're a Muslim anarchist, you're bound to kind of go, ooh, that sounds like a threat to nationhood and the nation state. It's like red alert. So. I guess it'll be good to talk about that a bit if we can, because I've always been more comfortable calling myself a Muslim because I think like that's pretty much what I'm comfortable with right now. My journey politically and spiritually were always connected, you know? Like, and I don't know, I'm sure you guys can relate to this in some ways. You know, I kind of had a journey in my youth, my earlier youth, where I was kind of like, you know, I grew up in a society which was already very patriarchal, very conservative, in a country like Singapore where there's no room for much freedom of speech and expression. And and I'm a survivor of domestic violence, family violence. So it was all very difficult to kind of see the light, you know, like kind of feel like you're empowered to make a change in your day-to-day situation. So for me, growing up in a very patriarchal, conservative Muslim family environment as well, it was hard for me to understand like why there's a God who punishes and, you know, stuff like that, you know, based on those interpretations of Islam. So around the point where I learned more about anarchism and that romantic idea of a freer world, it was also the time when I read more about feminism and Islamic feminism and how there are ways to empower yourself based on the teachings of the Quran and things like that. So when I read both, I was kind of like, how do you imagine it? You know, like two streams kind of going through my consciousness at the same time. Do you know what I mean? Like I was thinking both as trying to find my voice as a Muslim woman and then trying to find my voice in a political circular environment. So when I finally came to a point where I kind of go, all right, I've got this. I kind of know what I'm doing. I kind of know what I'm thinking now. I still kind of felt like I was better off calling myself a Muslim because I found a voice and the freedom to identify myself as such. Whereas in the political secular environment, like within the activist communities and such, I wasn't well accepted when I call myself an anarchist. You know what I mean? Because I mean, maybe I'm a bit sensitive or something, but like I could feel like, you know, when I'm in spaces and when I'm welcomed, and somehow like when you're in spiritually connected spaces, it's very welcoming. And and then when you're in the spaces of people that aren't spiritually connected specifically, it's kind of like everyone's got their own thing going on, and there's this kind of, I don't know, like this vibe, you know, like I don't know how to explain it. It's just kind of, I just don't feel safe and comfortable enough to call myself an anarchist in an anarchist community, even though I feel like my politics are. So
ironically, we just had some anarchist Christians on who happen to be from New Zealand as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw. I actually listened to it. It was a great interview. You guys did a good job with them. It's good. Yeah.
Thank you. I wish I would have known Kia ora. Was that right?
Kia ora. Yeah, kia ora.
There we go. Learning. I'm learning.
Well done.
But so is it like that thought of like no gods, no masters, and that whole motto that a lot of anarchists live by?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it was. Like I listened to that bit and I was just kind of like laughing on my seat because it was like, it's true. Like there is this idea, you know, that if you're an anarchist, then you're meant to by default be an atheist, right? Because it's like, you know, you don't believe in any imaginary being or imaginary power beyond yourself, and that everything is pretty much a tangible reality that you have to work with. And I think, you know, for the most part, I think I understand why that is the consciousness of anarchism. Like it makes sense in an environment that we live in a capitalistic world. But if you remember, and I don't really know a lot about, you know, the various histories of anarchism, but if you remember, like, you know, even like where I reference Emma Goldman a lot, obviously as a feminist. So, you know, even in her life, in her worldviews, when she was writing about anarchism and for society to to lean towards that. For her advocacy to do that. She was living like, a really difficult life. She was involved in lots of, she was in an abusive relationship. She had her own insecurities. And to me, life should teach you anarchism, not anarchism teach you life. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, if your reality is such that, your government is a dictatorship-based government, or if that's your reality, then to say that no gods and if that dictatorship government shoves in your throat that you have to believe in one god, and you say no gods, no masters, da da da. It's like, well, that's a nice mantra, but how do you survive day to day when you've got kids to feed, or you've got old people to take care of, and it's kind of like you can't change the system because you don't have the tools, you don't have the privilege of living in a so-called democratic-based environment where you can kind of say stuff like that and get away with shit, So it's like, I feel like, anarchism is kind of like an aspirational politics. Like you're supposed to aspire towards that. But how you live as an anarchist and how you define that in your own day-to-day reality has to be context specific. It has to be, because then it doesn't, otherwise it's meaningless. So for me, like the whole God thing, people kind of go, how come you're anarchist, but you believe in God or believe in a superpower or whatever? And it's just kind of like, well, how can you believe in anarchism if, it's kind of like you believe already in an idea that doesn't quite exist yet. It doesn't quite exist unless you live in your own world and you don't really connect with anyone outside of your world. It's like it's to me it's kind of like saying there's two concepts. One is one that believes in a power beyond themselves, and then one is a concept that believes the power is all within. And I've experienced life in a way where it was just more humbling to feel like you're not your own master. I like the idea that sometimes, the human strength is at some sort of maximum capacity, and then you just kind of let go, and you just kind of let's just go with the flow. If whatever comes. And somehow I find connection in Islam when I feel like I can kind of just let go and just not have to deal with some issues because it's beyond me, it's probably personal more than political, but yeah.
No, I find that fascinating because I was raised deeply religious in a off-sect Christian faith, but I'm not religious at all anymore, and I find that same self-determination and awe in nihilism now. I'm not a nihilist, but just the idea of chaos.
Sure.
No, I'm sure.
I'm nearly there.
But the whole idea of if I'm feeling stressed out, I can always just look up and I can look at the beautifulness of nature and the chaos that created it in my mind, and that creates that comfort for me of this doesn't fucking matter. In 10,000 years, I'm just a blip on a screen, and I'm just a piece of dust on a piece of dust in this vast universe of nothingness, right? That actually comforts me, and probably in a similar way that you're saying your religion comforts you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I definitely think we're on that same page there, because it's who really knows what's going to happen when you die? Come on, honestly, I don't know. I just feel I think there's a scientific rationale behind it, but then I'm kind of I don't know. I like to think that I go to this nice place where I can just chill out with Muhammad Ali and, I'm just kind of and you know what? And that connects with the whole creative thinking of anarchism as well. Because I feel unless you're a hardcore working class, you don't really do anything creatively, or you don't feel like you have an urge to be artistic about things in general, then you kind of live a really, I don't know, harsh life, right? If your day to day is a depressing routine of having to work for the man and then pay your taxes and hating it, and then still wanting to call yourself anarchists and having lots of I don't know, shit issues happening with your family or your relationships or whatever, then that's shit, But then if you're somebody who has, connections to a creative realm in your mind or in your spirit, then you kind of just get away from all that harsh politics shit for a bit, and then you find a way to create your reality in a way that's meaningful for you. And I think that's why I'm able to talk from where I am, kind of like I see Allah, I see my God as like, kind of like a best friend person, right? But it's also kind of like, but I'm real enough to know that, I don't know like what's going to happen when I die. I like to think that I go to a nice space where I can hang out, but I know that it grounds me as well, because I know that if I do bad shit in this world, there are repercussions. And then it's kind of like taking that concept, even in this world, if you do bad shit, there's repercussions, So it's just kind of like, it's just like a everlasting journey of like, just do the right thing and continuously, explore and find the truth in every aspect of your worldview, because, and of course the truth is subjective. So when I say the truth, I mean, I don't think I'm someone who's happy to just kind of go, oh yeah, this is the definition of anarchism. So if you don't live that way, then that's it. Like, I'd like to question and challenge it and just keep piercing it until I find spaces for other people, such as myself, to get involved, Mm-hmm. So I think, where am I going with this? Oh, creative spaces. So I think when you start thinking that way, and when you feel like you are living your own politics as an anarchist, when you actually feel like you're embodied in it, politically, but culturally, for me as a Muslim, as, whatever I am, then I just get to express all of this in another space. And I get to get involved with people from all sorts of backgrounds, politically or culturally. And then, then great shit happen, like art and music and food. So to me, it's like, if you, like what, you were saying about how if you kind of just say, at the end of the day, I'm just like a little speck of dust, like none of this matter in thousands of years later and blah, blah, blah. It's like, if you have that sort of zenness about it, like you've just kind of understood that, then everything's just a little bit more positive and everything's just a little bit more beautiful. And then you can just start working with beauty, So I think it doesn't really matter, like I personally feel it doesn't really matter whether you're an anarchist atheist, or an anarchist with with a worldview of cultural theologies behind it or something. It doesn't really matter, as long as we kind of find a way to build solidarities on some sort of common principles that there are human rights issues that we can all address and work together on. There are environmental issues that we can work together on. It's like, if we're on the same page in that, I think it doesn't really matter how people live their day to day, in their heads. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You sort of mentioned that that Allah keeps you in check, more or less, right? And
yeah.
I just like to think that people are inherently good, and maybe that's me just being naive, but but I think that the reason why people do bad things is because we live in a system that they more or less profit off of doing something bad, where if they didn't have that,
or they don't have like the ability to have expression, or that they're kind of forced into it through either the capitalist system or
exactly, yeah,
the different hierarchies that exist because of race or gender or whatever kind of group that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And
I get. Sorry.
So no, go ahead.
Oh, I think I'm getting where you're coming from, but I thought maybe I'll just intercept. So I used to think that way. Because you've got a sociology background and you've got access to all these concepts and theories. You got to construct an argument. So I think, yeah, okay, I get it. But there's a lack of philosophical analysis of how people behave with each other, and there's a lack of appreciation for self-care, mental well-being, and the dynamics of human psychology in anarchist communities. Do you get where I'm coming from? I think I think society at large, we are constructed to be this. I mean, we are living in a really fucked up world of, hyper capitalism, neo-colonialism, name it, all the injustices that you've described in some way earlier. But the idea of a bad person or a good person, I mean, apart from it being, like subjective and, based on the fact that we're living the structures that pressure us to behave certain ways, I think that's not the main issue. I think the issue also is ethics, like if you grow up in a community, okay, so I grew up in a really working class kind of upbringing as well. I had a homeless grandmother. I was going through shit as a child, and society would deem me to naturally be a statistic in the institutionalized system of child welfare institutions, or like mental institutions, or some sort of women's prison institution, right? Like that should be my natural cycle, because society would already deem me as a bad person towards that end. But the personal voice that everybody has, which comes from a space of, I guess, psychological, like your psychological journey throughout this whole thing, what kind of like makes you survive certain obstacles in life, that bit, that forms your moral views and your ethical views on things, and that stuff that even structures shouldn't necessarily have a big impact on. You got to work through that shit, and if you don't, then you probably rest on the fact that, yeah, well, that's why statistically you're this type of person or that type of person. So what I'm trying to say is, I think you're right in a sense that, the world that we live in forces us to be these two polarized groups of people, those who fuck people up and those who get fucked, right? But I'm just saying that even if you get fucked, like, it's like, everybody has their own moral compass that may be influenced by those external factors, but internally you have to work through stuff to figure out which part of the fence you're going to be in. You know what I mean? I don't know whether I'm clear on that. I'm just thinking out loud, really. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know like where I fall. Like I do want to believe that everyone is inherently good, and I approach life that way. But I don't know if like what is good. Like what does that mean? Like that's where it starts to break down for me, right? It all depends on the individual context of individual situations. So. And I fucking love these conversations, and I could go on for hours on this. And I just noticed the time, and there's so many other things that we wanted to touch on.
Oh, shit! Oh, yeah! Oh, my God! It's already 1:15. Okay.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. I love this.
Man.
One of the things that we hadn't touched on at all is veganism, and I wanted to touch on veganism and colonization.
Okay.
And so you okay switching gears for a second?
Yep.
So on top of being a Muslim anarchist feminist, let's throw another label on there. You're also vegan, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I always feel weird. Like we label ourselves so much, but I find that it's a good way to get the generalization of who somebody is, right? So what brought you to veganism on top of all of this?
Oh my God, I love this question and I've been waiting for an opportunity to really explore it. I'm glad to do it on your podcast because I can't seem to do it day to day in real life. I think people would like to think that I'm vegan because of the animals and because of the environment and because of all the stuff that people understand in a white consciousness of why people go vegan. And let's just put it out there. Like I do feel like veganism is an amazing ethics-based movement that promotes animal rights issues, that cares for the animals, that cares for the environment, that does whatever it can to kind of balance out the ecosystem to make it more sustainable, right? But I personally didn't go vegan because of all that. I became vegan because of my feminist consciousness first. So I was at a conference in 2011. I was at a conference where they were talking about decolonization and animal rights. And it was put on by people of color and indigenous people of Aotearoa, New Zealand. It was a very safe space to talk about stuff and ask questions that you might feel uncomfortable asking in white-dominated spaces. And, you know, I got triggered. I got triggered by the idea that cows are basically raped, you know, like through being impregnated with, you know, these hormonal injections and stuff. And I got triggered by the idea that certain animals, because of their gender, or their sex, they're, you know, abused or used in certain ways. That's what made me kind of go, fuck. Like, how can I be a feminist if I live as if this doesn't matter, you know? So, that really shook me. And then I went home that day. But before I went home, even like towards the end when there was Q&A, like people were asking for reflections and there was dead silence in the room. Some people were like, okay, that's sweet. I'm going to give up cow's milk from tomorrow, you know, something like that. But I was more like, even as a Muslim, you know, like if I believe in a higher being that creates creatures to live harmoniously amongst each other, and that we are obligated to care for each other and our environments, and to have no oppression. You know, the whole point of Islam is there's this philosophical idea that the king and the slave, you know, when they pray next to each other. It's like that idea itself, it's kind of like saying, I mean, it's obviously saying that there's shit happening. There's a king and a slave, you know? But the fact that when you're in Islam, you stand beside each other, you bow to, you pray with each other. That the idea, that to me is about the principle of equality. And so when I think about that for a moment, I kind of think, then we are supposed to be working towards ending oppression. Then why am I not doing my role as a Muslim to be part of that solution to ending oppression for animals? You know what I mean? And of course, the halal industry, you know, the vegans get really, really defensive about, you know, the halal slaughterhouse industry. And I had to kind of like remind people that halal just means like kosher, you know, like what can be eaten, what cannot be eaten. Mm-hmm. And plants are halal, fruits are halal, you know, water is halal. So I just needed to remind them that what they know of a word, which they don't even understand, is attached to an animal industry, probably as brutal as any other non-halal industry. You know, like battery cage farming and all that shit. It's you know, the difference is that one slaughters an animal, says a prayer, and assumes that's a good thing. The other one thinks that it's okay to eat them if they fed grass. You know, it's like it's basically the same bullshit, just different cultural ideologies underpinning it. So the way I see it, it's like this. If I'm going to be vegan, then I'm going to be vegan because I'm a feminist and I don't want to hurt any creatures based on their gender. I'm going to be vegan because I'm Muslim and I owe an obligation to care for the environment and the creatures that were created by Allah, and to make the world a more sustainable place for all. And then I went to this other bit, which was like, I'm also thinking about colonialism. Like, you know, when they taught the history, when that workshop exposed the history about how, you know, the colonial history of New Zealand, like they took a lot of the land that was, you know, very fertile to have the cattle farming in Waikato in Aotearoa, New Zealand. It was just kind of like, wait a minute. So all of this was basically was planted by the British colonialists and been force-fed through generations. So if my version of veganism is to boycott that practice or boycott that cultural way, that the culture of consumption, then I'll go vegan, you know? So I guess, the animal rights stuff is just kind of like in the, what do you call it, like on the surface or whatever, but on a deeper level, that's basically what motivated me to go vegan. I turned vegan overnight. Like, I didn't do a transition thing. I didn't do like, I'll do some vegetarian stuff first. And, you know, I just went hardcore straight to it. I was like, fuck all this shit. I'm just going to clear my fridge, donate to everyone else who still eats shit. But I started fresh, and then And then, of course, I missed so much about my cultural heritage and the food that we have, right? So it's like food, and with veganism, food is such a huge part of veganism, right? Come on, everybody goes vegan and then they get hungry all the time. So it's like, like 90% of vegan issues is about food. For me, it was more like, I love food. Like, I love food, but I'm vegan. And there's all these people out there, on social media and stuff, they're doing their bit already about veganizing certain foods, like fake meats and all that shit. And I was like, I started doing research on my own. So I decolonized my own veganism journey. Like, I actually did research on the food of the Malay world, the Nusantara world, in Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, Borneo, I started looking at certain articles that I bookmark online, and then I just started looking at maps and pictures, and then imagining so there was a huge pescatarian and vegetarian diet historically for the native peoples of my people, and then somehow over industrialization and globalization and capitalism, suddenly access to meat and poultry became so huge that it became part of our cultural menu. Do you know what I mean? So, I started thinking wait, so we didn't really need all this shit. My ancestors lived till 100 years without this shit. And now I'm supposed to think that this is part of my cultural heritage, at the same time, it's food, Indonesian and Malay food, I can't say it. I can't say the word. Contemporary?
Yeah. There we go.
Contemporary food culture is so meat driven that it would be very hard for me to make any impact by telling people just go plant-based, just eat vegetables and fruits, right? It's not fun anyway if you just eat salads every day. So I decided to start doing more research on the recipes that I inherited from my grandma and my mom. And I veganized every single recipe I could find. And I just used meat substitutes. And then I found out more about how to work with tofu and tempeh. And then it became just more exciting. Then veganism totally was beyond the white conscious model that I was kind of, that people preached to me when I wasn't vegan. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It became so holistic. It became I'm vegan because I have to be vegan, because I want to be vegan, and I can be vegan in my own way. And it became really empowering. And when I started that journey with the vegan food startup that I did, the Nusantara Indonesian tea cafe thing. Yeah.
So with making such a drastic change overnight, like you said, I went from not being vegan to next day all fucking in, right?
Yeah.
How did everyone around you react to that? Your friends and family?
Yeah. Well, even my vegan friends were worried. They're like, all right, sweet. Well, we're just going to check your vitamin levels now, It's just okay, Sasha, just, and then we did a supermarket trip and they're like, you got to have this, got to have that. I'm like, I don't even eat this, man. On a day-to-day basis, they're like, yeah, but you got to have, lots of fiber. So you got to eat this. And, but generally people who weren't vegan were just kind of this is just Sasha doing her weird thing, right? It's enough that I'm Muslim and I guess I'll go vegan now, and stirring up shit or something. But I was my family, they just, because they're, as I said, as you can imagine, when I mentioned earlier, they're quite conservative, they're very patriarchal based. In some ways, it's a little bit different when you get older, I think, for them. Anyway, point is that they were really shocked and they were worried that I was converting to become a Jain or Hindu. Mm-hmm. Just random shit like that. Just random things that conservatives think of when you become vegan, and that you've just suddenly transformed your whole life to become this ahimsa person. And I'm like, no, I'm still Muslim. I'm doing it because I am. And they still didn't understand it. And then it started turning out the amazing thing is it started this dialogue where my own father, my dad, he started doing research on veganism and he started reading shit from the Quran trying to justify why I shouldn't go vegan. All that stuff came out. was so good. It was so great because it was frustrating for me. Like it was not, it wasn't pleasant. Like I had to face this kind of antagonism when I visit them. But I got to engage with the issues. Do you know what I mean? Like people bothered to think, oh my God, they're going vegan. Now we have to find ways. Like, a lot of vegans, they feel really disheartened when, meat eaters, spam them or like troll on their Facebook pages or whatever and make jokes out of the vegan, philosophy, like vegan way of life or whatever. But I think when they start doing that, like anything, like when people start putting on a defense, it means you're getting somewhere. You've just like really annoyed them, for them to start feeling something. And that sort of negativity, like that sort of tension, that people think is negative can actually be transformed because that's what you need. Like, in any revolution, you need to have tension to build towards another phase, right? So I think that's good. Like, I mean, it gets annoying and frustrating emotionally, but it's there and you get to engage with it or not engage with it depending on your tactical positioning, So my family didn't receive it very well, but my highlight was last year or the year before, I did an Eid. So you know how you guys, I don't know, you guys have Christmas, we have Eid for Muslims, right? Our festival where, we fast a whole month and then we celebrate with lots of food. So I did a vegan Eid. Like I veganized everything on the family table because my mom can't be bothered cooking and my dad was busy and I was like, I'll do it. And then we had all these guests coming, all these meat-eating guests. They're like, oh, this tastes like meat, but it's not meat. I'm like, yeah, it's made of mushrooms, And it was so good. And like, people still think I'm weird, like the aunties and the uncles in the community, they still think, and they won't convert to veganism just like that or anything. It's not something they even consider. They love their food so much. But I think the idea is that I at least started, not justifying, but through demonstrating how easy it is to veganize food and make it tasty and make it authentically, make it culturally authentic as well to some extent, right? I think that was my way of contributing to my own community, and the response is still kind of, are you sure you have to go vegan? But it's still kind of like, they respect me now. It's like, right, you do your thing. But it took like 2.5 years, so.
That's good.
Yeah.
It took my parents like 6. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I think my parents finally just realized it wasn't a phase. And it's been 17 years now.
Yeah. I got a good argument though. Like when I said it, I was firstly I when I started up this food business thing, which by the way is kind of meant to be a social enterprise eventually. But when I pitched it to my parents, who obviously don't want me to get into self-employment, who obviously want me to work for. Work in a boring job or work in a corporate job or shit like that. Whatever they think is good for people to do. When I pitch it to them, they're like, I don't get it, but who's going to eat your food? I'm like, vegans, vegetarians, like there's heaps of them. And But also I said, just remember, I'm just promoting our cultural fruits to people. I just told them that way. Like, I'm just promoting to these white people that that our cultural food can be vegan friendly. I'm just doing that so that they can expand their taste palette and they can understand more about our cultures and our histories. I think when I explained it that way, it was more like, oh, you're doing it more than just, to force people to go vegan. So I'm not forcing people to go vegan. I'm just being me. And then if people like what I do and eat my food, it's good. That's it. Just make it simple for them. And then it became all easy, sort of.
So what's been your favorite part of your journey to now so far?
Favorite part? Oh, it's a big question. Who asked me that? Is it Jordan or Jeremy?
Jeremy, sorry.
Do you mean as an activist or
just in general? Like when you look back of where you are today and looking back at all the steps that it took you to get to where you are, what's that like? Either aha moment or just like that special part you're just like, I really that this it was amazing.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a sucker for misery sometimes. So like I think my favorite moment was when I emerged out of a low point in my life. I had like with activism and things like that, you tend to get burnout, right? Like if you don't take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. and remember that life is more than just what you do. It's also how you feel. And I think I got to a point sometime in the last 2 years where I kind of like had it over and done with justifying myself based on labels or based on people's perception on what is politically correct, and based on how people think I should live my life. I was like 30, I guess, back then. And I think that moment where I kind of, I went to a dark place, like, I went to a dark place where I kind of like attempted suicide and stuff. I can't believe I'm sharing with you guys this stuff, but yeah, here we go. So I went to a dark place and just thought that what's the point of all of this, like really I do what I can, but at the end of the day, there's more people who are doing what they're not doing, they're not doing enough. Mm-hmm. Then just kind of emerging from it, like through like quiet time. It was really great. I had quiet time, I think, for about 6 months. Just learning to wake up and just breathe and just like, it's okay to enjoy nature. And yeah, that was, I think, my favorite part, because I think when you grow up in an environment which is really hyper urban and full of, social injustice stuff in your face, probably 75% of your time, whether you're studying it or working on it or whatever, it's like you feel guilty, for like parking all of that and just living and breathing, And I think when I found a space where I was like, fuck this shit, my work is not who I am. My politics is not who I am. But who am I? I had that big Spider-Man moment. And then I just kind of rose out through it through a lot of quiet time. And then I did a lot of meditation and, read the Quran in my own time. Did a lot of poetry, just started expressing myself in quiet ways. I think that was my favorite time, because I think after that I just became a little bit calmer about everything.
I think that's brings up a really good point that I think it's only been the last little bit activists have really started to focus on, which is the self-care aspect of activism, mm-hmm. right? Where we tend to put ourselves in sometimes really dark places because we all care so fucking much, and sometimes just feel that utter despair. I don't know another way of describing it unless you...
Yeah.
So, I mean, thank you for sharing that, because it is something that, a lot of us go through, and for people who haven't gone through it, it's really hard to know what it's like.
Yes, and that's what I think is happening in Australia, New Zealand. So I was involved in lots of different groups, and some of these groups were my support networks, like actual day-to-day support networks, like when you're going through like depression, that phase in depression where you kind of really don't want to get out of bed. These activists were my support network in my real day-to-day life, like feed me and stuff. You know what I mean? So when I started thinking about how that bit of support is so important to nurture, but we just don't have enough time, or we don't make enough time for that stuff to happen. Like it just feels like we all come together, we talk about some things, we organize, we delegate certain things, or we create consensus about stuff, and then we leave. It's like, and I'm like, I feel sometimes when I go to these meetings or activities, I always feel like, I wonder how his mom is, or like, I wonder if she needs me to babysit. Like, I have these questions and I don't get a chance to talk to people because people are just so focused on the objective of the meeting, do your thing, go. And it's like, no, hang on. Like, where is our space where we support each other? Where is that time where we kind of take downtime and go, how's everyone going? Ask each other, are you okay? What's happening? There's just not enough spaces for that. So I think also it's quite hard because it's about trust, right? So sometimes you go to these activities or meetings and you don't know like half of these people. You only know one or two people, and then it's like, where do you start? Asking You don't ask a stranger, how are you okay? Generally speaking. So, yeah, I think you're right. There's a growing sort of momentum happening, probably globally. If you're talking about it, I'm talking about it, and I'm sure a lot of people are talking about it. I think it is kind of emerging as a trend to do with it, and it's important. But I think that like with anything, it will have its hiccups. Like I've seen also a lot of groups or Kickstarter campaigns. There's stuff that people are doing which is really great. Like they've got like qualified clinical psychologists supporting them pro bono or stuff like that. They've got resources. Do you know what I mean? And then there's stuff that just like they just want to create this safe space. And I'm one of those. I don't know if you met or you are one of these people, but I feel very what do you call it? Like uncertain, or what do you call it? Like uncomfortable with the word safe space these days. Sometimes safe spaces are used to hurl out abuse. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or like to create stories or to tell stories that have no relevance to how that space was supposed to be formed in the first place. And so when people say safe space, da da da, and it's just accountability, da da da, like all these textbooks lines, and then they put it in a project, and they're like, this is going to be support group. And I'm like, I don't know. Doesn't look like it's well-resourced to take care of vulnerable people. It's like most activists who've gone through shit and then do activism, if they've gone through some form of personal experience of violence or abuse or real life day-to-day oppression, you know what I mean? It's not something you can just kind of like create a safe space. It's just not. You have to have resources to make sure that if you can't be there for the person, or if the group can't do certain things for the person, then what are you going to do, So yeah, I just think it's a growing movement, but it's a movement that we have to also kind of monitor in some way. I don't know what monitor is the right word, but yeah.
It's that aspect of like we're also focused on fixing all the fucked up things in society. We forget that we need to take care of our own community and create that community, right?
Yeah,
because that's what we're doing it for, anyways. We want that community, so we just got to focus on actually creating that with ourselves. And that's one of the things I've always felt kind of missing in not just like anarchism or animal rights, but ever since I left organized religion, I feel like I lost a huge sense of community.
Yeah, I heard that on the other interview too. You're right. I think, yeah, so it's like whether it's organized religion or yeah, I think you're right. I don't know. You know what? I agree. It's like organized religion seems to have this kind of like, they've sort of like sussed that bit out about community. Like they know how to create community, and that's only because they know how to create effective imagined communities. Do you know what I mean? It's imagined. And the point, I think, is if we can create communities that can imagine like this positive, holistic, supportive future, based on amazing positive stories, like that could be key to it. Like we just have too much negative, depressing, unfortunately, true life shit happening that yeah, we just need to have more space for imagination, I think.
Where's that fine line for that imagination and cultiness, right?
Yeah, true. That's true too. But I don't know. I'm always just like, like just see how it goes. Like you gotta get an idea, put it out there, see what happens, right? So, like you just. I think if you're grounded enough and you've got a good, in Tereo Maori here, we call it kaupapa, like you've got a good kind of sense of, like your philosophical base, you know what I mean? If you've got that sorted and then you work based on that, then you should be sweet. Like you can imagine whatever great stuff, you can imagine. And then it's just about like coordinating. That's another skill that not a lot of activists have. A lot of activists, they're not, like they're very anti-leadership, they're very anti-authorities on things, right, by nature of the politics of anarchism. But it's like sometimes you need people to just coordinate people to make some sort of peaceful order happening. I believe in that, because people are different, and that skill of making sure people feel comfortable with each other is something that we lack resource-wise in a lot of spaces. So yeah, effective coordination and and fostering imagination, I think, are two key factors. Yeah.
And I think another thing with self-care is a lot of people will use activism as a way of coping with the shit they're dealing with as well.
Yeah.
And
yes.
digs them so much far deeper into their depression and other issues. And so I think people just need to take care of themselves too if they can.
Yeah. Which is why I've quit. Well, I didn't quit. I mean, I'm always kind of involved, but I choose which issues now that I'm going to focus on. Like I used to be, for the sake of intersectionality, for the sake of, making sure that everybody gets some sort of support, that I get involved in 1,001 issues in 24 hours or something. And it's like, nah, that's just naive, I think. So what I do now is I kind of reserve my energy for what I value. And I know it sounds like, a lot of people will say like, well, that's very selfish because you're just based on your own kind of like being, and then kind of like, rather than what the community needs. I'm like, no, fuck that. I matter. I was part of these movements and I did what I can. And these movements don't have the resources to take care of me. So I'm going to take care of me so that you guys don't have to, and I'm kind of like, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to cook because that's what I'm passionate about. And I'm going to make vegan food because that's what I believe in doing, in sharing a purpose and bringing the communities together. And I would love to focus my energy on West Papua, which I don't know whether we have time to talk about, but which is an important issue to me because West Papua is, currently invaded and occupied by the Indonesian government, and it's a tragedy. It's a real time story of how neocolonialism gets really fucked up when brown people and brown people eat each other up, And I just feel like as a person of color who's, partly Indonesian of descent, and who understands how colonialism, deprives brown people of healing each other, like self-healing in our own communities. This is something that's so important to me. And I feel like there's so many issues out there, I know, but it's like this, if we don't talk about West Papua, if we don't, as people of color or brown people, or just generally people per se, then we don't understand the effects of colonialism, how fucked up it is, not just on a personal level, but on a structural level, like even today, like, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's not about white colonialism anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's a next phase of analysis that activists need to think of. Like what happens, people feel like China's going to be a super threat or whatever. Well, the white world does, but it's like, so what happens when they do start monopolizing based on the textbook of colonial history, like what happens when they do that then? How do we deal with that as people of color in our own right, without looking for strategies that, white activists have come up with in their own political ideologies, So
you recently did a talk in Wellington, correct?
Yes, I cooked, I fed, and then I spoke.
Did you want to talk about that a little bit more?
A little bit, yes, please. I went to Wellington because Wellington's the capital city of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I wanted to kind of hang out with some friends as well. But also, they have a much more open kind of forum for issues recognized to talk about West Papua. But what happened was that I decided that my approach to talking about West Papua, I didn't want to do it just by like having a panel or a seminar. It's just dumb. It's just boring, actually. Not dumb. It's just boring. So I said, okay, I want to feed people because I have people who've always wanted to eat my food, but they're not in Auckland. So I went to Wellington, told them to pay me some money, gain some funds so that I can, because I'm going to Indonesia in July, and I thought I could take some of that funds to visit some of the West Papuan activists there and kind of like exchange knowledge, but also bring out, some meaningful conversations to bring back to Aotearoa, New Zealand. And not just conversations, but hopefully action points that I can take back. So it was predominantly a vegan-based kind of group that came to this, and they probably don't have a lot of analyses on colonialism either. But I think it went really well. I think people generally were interested to know what was happening in West Papua. The point that I made there was that to understand West Papua's oppression is to understand Indonesia's oppression as well. Like, it's not like this country that's just hungry for power and resources. It's been part of a colonial history of Dutch oppression for 700 years. And that's fucked the people up so much that they've embodied that sort of consciousness of imperialism. And so when the victim becomes a perpetrator, and I use that analogy a lot, when a victim becomes a perpetrator, how do you work with the perpetrator? You know? And so, yeah, I just tried to reference and frame that conversation in Wellington, to raise awareness on West Papua, but also to hopefully begin a nuanced conversation on neocolonialism, that it's not just about, kind of challenging the effects of white colonialism around the world, but how do we engage and challenge oppressions within our own communities, the brown communities. So, yeah.
Well, I can't believe it's already past an hour. How can people get in touch with you and find out more about your projects and stuff?
Well, I'm on social media. So on Facebook, if I even though I do food, I tend to mix it up a bit and put stuff on music and politics and culture sometimes. So Nusantara Indonesian Tea Cafe Pop-Ups is the Facebook name. On email, I'm nusantaravegan@gmail.com. You probably put that. Are you going to type it up somehow in the text of this podcast or no?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, so that, and I don't know. I'm just in Auckland, so people know how to find me, I think. No, just email me. Just email me, and then we can extend conversations. So yeah.
I have loved this so much. I could talk to you for hours. But we end every episode saying "fuck, shit, damn." Would you mind saying it for us this week?
Aww. Do I have to?
You don't have to. I mean,
yeah. Nah, I'm gonna say. I'm not gonna say it. I'm just gonna say. Can I say something else?
Whatever you want.
Oh, okay. I'm just gonna say. Just keep it real. How about that?
I like it. I like it a lot.
Keep it real. Okay, go well.
This week you heard
Final Russian by Talk Demonic.
Right now you're listening to
Aldgate Patterns by Little People.
So if you're looking for ways to help the podcast, number one, tell a friend. Just go tell a friend to listen. That sincerely just helps us in so many ways because we get an extra listener. Or
shout it out on social media.
You can do social media. You can make a posting about it. You can rate and review us on whatever aggregate you're using, whether that's iTunes or now Google Play.
When they allow ratings.
But, always go subscribe.
Yeah.
We're on quite a few other. We're on Stitcher.
You can find us on Vegan Feed.
Yeah, I love Vegan Feed. Go check out all the other amazing podcasts out there that are vegan-centric. Yeah. So go help out the show. Go rate and review us at one of those. Tell a friend. Go subscribe. Just help us out.
Or even if you just don't have any of those and you just want to leave us a nice comment, email us.
Totally. Just
like
email
that.
us. I love getting emails.
And speaking of talking to us and being our friends like that, you should find us on social media. We post things there pretty much every day that we don't post on the show or talk about on the show. So find us, be our friend, and I'll not sucker punch you.
Sucker punch.
That's how friendship works.
Dude, I've never had a friend who didn't sucker punch me at least once.
It's true.
Kidney shot every once in a while.
Yeah.
Get a little ball tap going on.
There's a reason why I didn't like being friends with you and some of the other people I know. And I was always the youngest, so I always got the brunt of it.
Fuck shit damn, man.
Fuck shit damn.
Whichside Podcast is hosted and produced by Jordan Halliday and Jeremy Parkin of the Whichside Media Collective. with web design by Jordan Halliday and sound design by Jeremy Parkin. Booking by Mari Halliday. Theme music by Commandantes. Go to wishsidecollective.org to check out the other shows in the collective. As always, fuck shit damn.